And the fact of the matter is, most drag performers are not grooming children. Most drag performers, when they are engaging in Drag Queen Story Hour, there's benefits to that. The benefits of Drag Queen Story Hour, you know, kids love being read to. You know, I remember being read to as a child. I remember sitting in the library, and I remember the librarian being a little boring and just, oh, kids, here's the story, here you go. When kids are imaginative, kids love imagination and fantasy and fun. And there is something that is very imaginative and fantasy filled about drag performance, whether or not you are a cis or trans drag performer. And so children love to be read to by drag performers because it's fun and it's imaginative and it's fantasy filled. And they're not even saying, okay, you have to be a drag performer, you have to be trans, you have to be LGBTQIA. And that's part of the argument that I disagree with, that LGBTQIA people, and specifically drag performers, are grooming children. We're not grooming them. We're trying to say that you are welcome to be you as you are. If you are cis, heterosexual, fabulous. If you end up being queer, fabulous. We're not trying to steer you any particular way. But I remember being a queer child, and I remember not having any sort of mentor or model to look at. And I felt very othered, and I felt very different. And it actually caused a lot of mental health problems. And so when you actually introduce children to the diversity of gender identity.
Hey, the God Pod! Thanks for the rating party of 37. Welcome in, disciples. If it's your first time here, I'm covering the news from a dumpster fire perspective, but, you know, settle in. You'll have a great time. Can everyone go to twitch.tv/thegodpod and give a follow back? Thanks so much.
To the diversity of sexuality,
welcome
to
in.
The diversity of everything other than the cis heteronormative family.
Oh, and we're in the middle right now of watching Tim Pool debating a drag performer who's actually being incredibly eloquent and is, you know, basically spitting facts right now. It's just been like great point after great point after great point. Almost 2 minutes of uninterrupted, amazing points.
You show kids that it's okay to be you as you are. You don't have to follow this particular guideline that is, again, defined by the patriarchy. And you can be whoever you are, and you're welcome to be who you are. I'm not saying you must be trans, you must be a drag performer. But if you end up being that when you grow up,
we just started.
Great. And I remember not having that sort of influence. And I remember the impact that it had on my mental health as a queer youth in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, not seeing anybody that was like me anywhere in society. And it made me fearful to be who I am.
Are you familiar with Desmond is Amazing?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts? I'll ask some questions, but I just want to let you open up.
Yeah, I don't know Desmond. I have seen Desmond online. I know that they are a queer youth who wanted to engage in drag. And I think...
So that was, like I said, almost 2 minutes straight of really, really good points, one after another. I guess immediately not going to address any of them, and then Tim's doing exactly what he did when I was on the show too, which is, hey, can we show you some extreme examples and get you to defend them in real time? Because like everything you're saying, let's ignore that, and then we're going to go right to this extreme example. So what do you think about this? So do you approve of this? Because this is, I got some footage here of what we believe are drag performers strip dancing for kids. So what do you think about that? Yeah.
I think that's perfectly okay. I don't think that Desmond's parents...
Hey, thank you. Political Poppy for gifting a tier 1 to the God Pod.
Parents are behind the scenes saying, you have to be a drag performer. We're trying to groom you to be trans. There is actually no benefit to it because queer people and trans people are overwhelmingly ostracized in the society that we live in, that I don't think that a person who didn't want to engage in that would choose to engage in that knowing the kind of ostracism and criticism and hatred that would come to follow. The things that I've read about this child are disgusting. And that's so much more horrific than this person saying, I want to put on a skirt and a wig and perform.
You're familiar with go-go dancing, I assume?
Yeah.
And bikini bars?
Sure, yeah.
In many states, what they define as stripping is the removal of any clothing on stage with no nudity. The act of removing clothing is the stripping of clothing.
So, Tim, this is stripping?
If you were on stage for a bunch of adults...
I'm on stage for a bunch of adults right now.
Offering you
hell yeah,
money for the explicit purpose of seeing you remove clothing, this is where you have you know, context matters, right? Like,
yeah,
I think.
But I think I get where you're going at, Tim. But here's the thing: drag performers, like there is the reveal of drag. I think that a lot of people just aren't familiar with drag culture, and there is this idea of performing where there's a reveal. And that doesn't mean stripping down and being sexual. Taking off a garment to show an undergarment does not mean that it is stripping or being sexual.
So in, I think South Dakota might be the state, but there's a bunch of states. Women aren't allowed to be fully nude on stage. So they have what they call bikini bars or go-go bars. The women will go on stage and do what is in every way identical to what Desmond does on stage here, removing an outer layer of clothing in exchange for money from the audience. Desmond is a child in this. I could be wrong. It's been several years. This is 2019. My understanding was that this was an adult bar full of adult males watching the child perform on stage and do things that many have argued were sexually suggestive, especially in the Gwen Stefani portion of this, and then in exchange for money. So,
and again, it's one of those things where it's like, you're not going to address any of the points that were raised. All of them, again, they were astute. They're exactly like getting right to the center of this entire discussion. This is not grooming. This is not sexualization. This is 100% just, again, reading stories to children while people wear costumes. It's what people have been doing. Drag performances in and of themselves aren't sexual. You yourself have probably enjoyed drag performances your entire lives. Half of the right-wingers are drag performers. Rudy Giuliani, for example. Steven Crowder is another example. All of these people are consistently doing drag, Michael Knowles, and no one bats an eye. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, here's a new entry point. We can try to pass new laws and legislation that directly target the queer community. Once again, the queer community specifically being outed, right? And we're going to come at them from this angle where, hey, well, what about the removal of clothing or the garments or anything like that? When matched with all of that, by the way, Tim is again just going like, well, what about this anecdote? Because, you know, do you defend this? Doesn't look great, does it? You know, someone dancing sexually for little kids. Is that what you're about?
So for many people who live, and we can just say perhaps in a more conservative area, this is indistinguishable from stripping. So this is an 11-year-old doing the same things bikini dancers do for money.
Yeah, but I don't think that it's indistinguishable from stripping. You know, I, as a drag performer, I've been performing for 8 years now. And I will go out there and I might come out in something like this where I'm wearing a blazer and I perform and I take it off and people will cheer and give me money. Are they cheering and giving me money because I'm stripping and turning them on? No, it is entertainment and it's a performance and it's a part of queer art. I don't think that this child,
Libby Dunkington, Lance, I have a serious question for you, and I usually look to you for your point of view on things. Remember how Jonah Hill was in some hot water a couple weeks back for setting boundaries with his partner? Go on.
Think that they're trying to be sexual. I don't even think that the parents are trying to sexualize the person. I think that this is a kid who has seen drag culture, knows that they're queer, and wants to engage in it in a way that is age appropriate. Did that child get naked on stage? I don't think so.
Bikini dancers don't get naked either.
Yeah.
So that's the issue.
Yeah, but also there's a difference between standing up on a box and.
But so he didn't clue into that at all. It's basically like, you understand how different things can be perceived differently as well as intent, right? Like, so there's a very big difference between me taking my jacket off, not because I'm trying to make you all get off at that moment, like, hey, are you all ready to come, boys? And just like, hey, this is a part of the performance or the dance. In the same way, certain people doing certain dances will do a move that impresses a lot of people. Like, have you ever seen like the performances of either contortionists, Cirque du Soleil, you name it, people doing dance numbers at a certain point, they want to get you to be like, oh, okay, that was impressive, neat. That doesn't mean at that point it's like, all right, now get off, all of you.
And go-go dancing, you know, thrusting yourself out there for very obvious sexual intentions versus somebody who is just doing a drag performance. And I think that's something that really bothers me, is that people equate drag performances with strippers and with adult entertainment. Drag performances are actually all ages, but there are specific performances that are appropriate for, say, Drag Queen Story Hour versus a nightclub.
Yes. I don't know if, see, I was kind of like this kid on the opposite direction. I got into Little League because I was groomed and felt pressure to make my parents happy.
Hello, I can agree with that.
So I went into Little League when I really wanted to. I was really a gay kid. In my day, we didn't use queer. Queer was a slur. I'm 53 years old, so I'm a little old, from a different generation. So queer was an offensive thing to call people. And
yeah, it's been reclaimed.
As far as like influences, gay influences, I grew up, now this is in the 80s. I grew up across the street from two moms. I think a lot of this tolerance that they're trying to thrust on the public starts at the home. And it's like, these kids come from tolerant homes. And so I
Yeah, but what about the kids that don't come from tolerant homes?
well, I don't think those are the kids that are being read to.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but that's the thing. There are queer children being raised in homes that are intolerant. I myself grew up in a home where my parents became much more tolerant when they realized that I was a queer person. And there was a lot of hesitation and objection at first. And that was based off of what they had learned growing up. And so we're perpetuating this culture of gay is weird, LGBTQIA is, oh, that's other, you don't know, don't engage in that. That's adult content. There's something wrong with that.
People in the community are trying to say, don't say queer. Yeah, I know a lot of people are really like offended by, you know, a lot of younger queer folk using queer. I was like, it's been reclaimed. It's awesome.
Wish I had grown up in a school environment where I had adults and other people around me saying, it's okay to be who you are.
I think one of the, oh, go ahead.
No, I guess, because
Oh man, I don't have to be the one to do this, but like it's good that they're platforming different voices and allowing them a chance to speak, because in this 10 minutes, like, you know, Tim's obviously still reverting to his dirty tactics of being like, well, what about this? Have you seen this? Do you defend this kind of stuff? But at the end of the day, I mean, they are getting the most amount of talking time. And, you know, I don't think Tim's learned anything through this process, unfortunately. Like, I don't think it's going to stop him from, like, if I checked his Twitter today, is it filled with transphobic nonsense? Probably.
Yes, I grew up in an earlier time, and I did not have your experience at all. My experience came from other kids. I don't know what can I say faggot on here? I was called a faggot every day of my life. I was called.
Tim did not say whether the answer was yes, because I don't know on YouTube if you can get roasted for that. You can get roasted on Twitter if Twitch if the person, like the host, if I was to say the F slur, even if I was self-referencing, calling myself one.
A faggot, and I was still myself, and I don't know, and I think that's what we need to be teaching kids is not for me to tolerate something that you do, but for you to be able to take my opinion and just say okay, and still be you.
But that's the reason that doesn't happen, is because queer kids are growing up in environments that are not necessarily queer. And when you ban any sort of LGBTQIA education from school levels until you get to high school, that's where you breed people who fear and who other folks who are LGBTQIA. The reason that you were called a faggot, the reason I was called a faggot, was because those other kids grew up in environments where they heard their parents calling other people faggots.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do, is trying to let folks and let kids today in this generation know that it is okay to be queer. It's okay to be LGBTQIA. And again, there's nothing inherently sexual about being LGBTQIA, just in the same way that there's nothing inherently sexual about being cis heteronormative. And there is a connection there, of course, according to who you love and who eventually you have sex with.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we're trying to teach kids about explicit
Like
sex.
I gotta completely disagree. We have these two books here, Genderqueer less so, This Book is Gay more so, explicitly teach about overt sexual acts, depicting them, and were provided to children sometimes as young as age of 10.
Tim, let me ask you, when you say
Holy shit, Mr. B just coming in hot. Probably not going to last long. People are born with autism and people are born with cancer. Just because someone was born with these things doesn't mean we should accept it and celebrate it. Same goes for gender dysphoria, which is a mental illness. Sounds like you're looking for eugenics, my friend. Sounds kind of eugenics-y. Where you're like, well, yeah, if you have a terminal disease, that's the equivalent of, you know, this other thing. That's, yeah, it's kind of a gross outlook on life.
children, what do you mean by children? Because children could be 0 to 18. What do you mean by children?
So this was 10-year-olds. This is middle schoolers. This book is gay specifically was given to...
You don't think that middle schoolers who are starting to go through puberty and who are starting to have sexual intercourse and starting to experiment with sexuality, you don't think that any of them are queer and might need to learn about queer experience?
There's a difference between sex ed and This Book is Gay, which teaches those children how to use Grindr.
And again, he was trying to use that same thing against Emma to try and, like, you know, slander Emma somehow being like a pedophile or a groomer, simply because she was like, I'm not for banning of books in the same way that Republicans are. There are young people who use Grindr. It's the same thing with that dude who used to be one of the head and security guys for Twitter, who got, again, slandered as a groomer her writing a thesis on the fact that, hey, there's a large percentage of young gay boys and teenagers who end up using and pretending to be adults to go onto adult apps in order to find communities, and they can get hurt. Of course they can. It's where predators are going to try and take advantage of them. And it's dangerous. So there has to be some form or measure for us to acknowledge this is the reality. This is the real world. This is what happens. And then once we've done that, how do we keep them safe?
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you kindly to our Lord and Saviors Peyton L. Just and Xander Corvus. Without you, we are nothing. And now, a shout out to our Knights of the Square Table. Amazing Flesh, Anna Loves Riley, Adrian McCarthy, DM Rivera, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hegbard Celine, Izzy Solidarity, La Media Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Nettle, Omni, Peanut Butter Blonde, Political Papi, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Kubi, Cernicus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Dimmel, Thomas, Trevbot EXE, Lucidry, Words Greenwood, Cheryl Alvarez, Tony Perkins, Thomas, O'Pecker, Travis McClinton, and Victoria Bell. Thank you so much. And a huge shout out to all the other people who make this entire show possible. Without you, it would not exist. If you can support us, please go to patreon.com/theserfs, and even $1 can help unlock all of the little goodies and help make this show entirely possible.